I had a nightmare not too long ago. Thinking back upon it, it was a strange one. Starting out with the early memory of my childhood at the arcades. There was this game along the lines of Stacker, where the goal was to stack a series of quickly moving blocks on a screen. If you manage to reach the top, you'll get a neat prize like a PlayStation 1. However, that final tile always seemed to slip off and fall, no matter how perfect my timing was. After the 10th try, I gave up, and a kind old arcade attendant, leaning back in his chair, said, "Don't blame yourself. It's designed that way by those who made the machine. It will slip away at the worst time for you, and they see no reason to fix it." While hurtened by his words, it was only the beginning of my worries. I repeatedly encountered scenarios where whatever I was reaching out for would slip away at the last second. That delicious fruit at the store, pip. The last step of the stairs, thump. Buying the Sunday paper only to have the entire rack sprout legs and run away at full speed. While chasing the newspapers, I would end up covered in ads. I woke up from a nightmare, utterly frustrated and wanting for some good news. In my email inbox, I found it. Google had announced the initiative to use what they referred to as core web vitals in their algorithm for search results. Initially 3 new metrics, but more would be to come. The first, largest contentful paint. The next, first input delay. And finally, cumulative layout shifts. These metrics would be used as strong indicators of good user experience on the internet and promote sites with better experience designs. Cumulative Layout Shift reminded me of my nightmare. CLS is a measure of visual stability. Avoiding unexpected layout changes is important to scoring well here. Google's goal is a score of 0.1 or a maximum of 10% layout change not triggered by user input. How is this measured? It's by the area that changes on the screen in percentage of the viewport. So if you have a relatively small change on the desktop, you could have a huge change on mobile. There was a study saying that sites with a good CLS score would see about 24% lower cart abandonment rates. What causes these layout shifts? Dynamically loaded elements such as banners, ads, third-party content, and lazy loaded items. You may have experienced it before. You're reading a bit of content and plan on clicking a link only to have an ad slide in, so you end up clicking on it instead. A certain search engine's related searches section is notorious for this. I now remember why I dreamt of newspapers fleeing for their lives. I once encountered the sites whose content was interesting, but as soon as you hovered over anything, it would load 8 to 12 separate ads above that content, pushing it right off the screen. Having worked in advertising yonks ago, one of the ways we dealt with this is by standardizing the sizes of our ads so a placeholder could be put in and swapped out once the ad was loaded. If we had a 468 by 60 pixel banner ad, we would then reserve a space that was 468 by 60 pixels on the client side with the background to avoid shifting the layout. If you're dealing with the network, you may not have the luxury of standard sizes. It's best to over-allocate space and have a little extra than it is to come up short and ship content. Use the data to predict average sizes and add a little buffer. For the overall user experience, it's best to not rely on dynamic content like these and consider a change to your revenue model. People have also asked about images because some images may be lazy loaded in order to speed up a page. Treat it the same as these dynamic elements. Put in a placeholder or specify a fixed size or aspect ratio so the browser can allocate the space accordingly. Another problem that has come up lately is stacking dynamic elements. Sites are including promotional banners, privacy notifications, and store policies. When you have multiple items loading in like this, you not only suffer from a layout shift of that element, but all the other similar elements you impacted in the process. Your great score will go away in a puff of smoke. A good way to avoid getting dinged for layout shifts in response to user interaction is by displaying a loading indicator with the space to be used by the new content blocked out as a placeholder. This kind of response should be near instant, 100 milliseconds or less, and the actual content can take the time it needs to render. You may have seen skeleton loading indicators on infinitely scrolling sites to address multiple layout shifts. These operate on similar principles, providing a placeholder for loading content and displaying progress towards retrieving that content. These skeletons should be appropriately sized so hydration shouldn't cause a layout shift. If it does, you need to revisit the design of those. The loading time of this type of content could be just long enough for it to negatively impact your CLS score despite being triggered by a user interaction without these placeholders. I will have another video on appropriately handling infinite scrolling, so keep an eye out for that. To recap, Cumulative Layout Shift is a metric to be used in an algorithm update for Google search results, rumored to be coming out in April of 2021. This score is a measure of how much your layout changes unexpectedly or happening too long after user interaction. You should aim for less than 10% of your screen changing under these circumstances. To do so, you should use placeholders for any dynamically loaded content, displaying them as quickly as possible, and reducing your reliance on uncontrollable layout elements. I hope this video was helpful to you, and as always, if you have any questions, post them in the comments below.